swords clashing, spells flying, terrifying monsters. The thrill of victory just within or just out of reach. We all want that in our D&D games, especially as the Dungeon Master. But instead, there are times that we end up with slow decision-making, endless dice rolls, and battles that drag on to their conclusion long after the victor has been decided. What we need to do is stack the deck in our favor. And so today, I've got 7 tips to help you to improve your encounters so they feel more like epic battle and less like doing your taxes. Necessary, but boring. It's pretty common advice on this topic to suggest using interesting maps in order to provide different options for players as they immerse themselves with the world and they choose to take unusual actions that you wouldn't have otherwise expected. Naturally, I concur with this great advice, but I do have a caveat to add today. Dragging people towards ledges, shoving them into pits of acid, attacking columns in order to try and bring down the roof, swinging in on a chandelier, or flipping tables for the purpose of flipping tables, or in order to gain cover, are awesome ways that our players bring excitement to the scenario by utilizing the awesome maps that are available in the world today. However, one thing that doesn't get said enough is that as the DM, it's our job to model the kind of behavior that we need at the table. And so my caveat is this: don't wait for the players to use the terrain. As part of encounter design, an easy exercise is to just come up with one way that you can use the terrain so that your monsters can engage with the world against your characters. This will probably take you all of 30 seconds, but spending time coming up with these ideas on a regular basis and then modeling them for your players is going to not only enhance the excitement of what you're doing, but model the behavior so that your players realize what's possible and start to engage in a similar fashion. Another common mistake, especially when we're trying to run a nice, fast-paced combat, is for us to leave monsters where they are once they're in close combat range. Provoking an opportunity attack gives the player that just had that down feeling of being beaten up to have a sudden upside of having the opportunity to cause some damage in return. It provides play and power for the marshals who have already decided to play the hardest role in the game of being up in the danger zone instead of sitting back with world-altering magic. From a tactical standpoint, provoking an opportunity attack from the burly frontline guy in order to get back at a squishier target allows you to increase the threat level of your encounter and the tension across multiple different players. Likewise, it actually increases the danger level of foes that are particularly fast or maneuverable or have special modes of movement, as provoking an opportunity attack on your turn is better than taking a full attack on the next person's. Especially in the modern era of focus fire, D&D battles tend to get less tense and less deadly as the fight goes on. Action economy is king, and the more foes that you slay, the less actions there are to work against you. But combat should grow more tense over time, not less. And there are a couple of ways that you can ensure that that happens. One of the simplest is to use waves or teaser monsters. Start with one particular portion of the creatures from the encounter that you have planned out on the field and add them as their initiatives roll up or as rounds roll by, so that the tension level continues to rise as more and more enemies appear on the field. Even if your players finish off all of the creatures that are on the field beforehand, the fact that another wave is coming introduces a new level of threat and increases tension. The creatures don't have to die any faster or slower than they normally would, but tension still rises. Another way is to gate special abilities behind a hit point threshold. Instead of using the dragon's fiery breath weapon at the beginning of an encounter because you want to get that recharge, consider enhancing the breath weapon to do more damage, but waiting until after the creature has been bloodied, a term from 4th edition, before you unleash it. At half of its hit points, it gains the bloodied condition, and now its breath weapon is able to be fired. Alternatively, you could take a page out of Mythic Creatures and automatically recharge the breath weapon at that particular point so that there's a sudden upflux of danger. Make sure you telegraph this as the fiery elemental of the dragon bursts with energy and flames roil out from between its scales, so that your players know what's coming and know that things just got worse because of the amount of damage they just dealt. Another trick is to do something like what I've done on a beholder in the past, by tying their legendary resistances into their eye stalks, and so as the battle progresses and legendary resistances are used up, eye stalks wither away way, removing the less powerful options and increasing the chances that the more powerful options are going to come out in the later stages of the fight. You can add this same principle to other encounters by increasing damage that is dealt as legendary resistances are used up. Just be careful that you're not pushing things too far so that it feels like a complete punishment, because legendary resistances are already a touchy topic. If you haven't watched my video about that, check it out up here. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our battles tend to drag down to the finish line instead of rising to a crescendo and suddenly ending. But when it comes to good D&D combat, sudden endings are better than slow ones. And that's because if we have a slow and lingering ending after the victory has actually been decided, then that decline feels like a slow drag that just bleeds out our tension instead of that fiery, awesome moment when the big bad evil guy meets his doom. And so anything you can do to speed up the end of the combat once the victor has been decided is absolutely worth your time. Chain reactions where everybody dies all together, or rituals that force the damage off of the big bad guy and onto his minions so that the less interesting creatures die first. One-hit minions that die swiftly so that the end of a battle can come fast after you've finally finished off the necromancer who kept bringing them onto the field. Or even just having creatures break morale and try to flee and narrating their endings are all great ways that you can end a battle suddenly at its high point instead of waiting for every last hit point to be decided mechanically. Alternatively, in some groups, you could hand over narrative control. Let them know with the death of the big bad evil guy, the victory has been decided, and ask them to describe how they go about knocking down the last few targets. This will allow you a lot more playtime in, and there are some players that are going to really enjoy getting to flex their creative muscles with less constraints by the rules. Just be cautious that you're not using this too much, otherwise Dungeons & Dragons loses the game part of role-playing game. Excitement in combat is about reversals of fortune. Pacing in combat is much like pacing anywhere else, wherein that success followed by failure, followed by success, followed by failure makes for a solid pace, while a string of successes or failures can start to drag on into monotony. We don't ever want our combat to be stuck on just one note the entire time. And that's one reason that I really enjoy legendary actions, is because it allows the DM to insert moments of reversal of fortune immediately following the successes of the players. But even when you're not using a legendary monster, you can add complications to a battle when things are getting a little bit stale. This can easily apply to either side of the battle as you add in complications that interfere with the progress of whichever side happens to be dominating at the time. Reinforcements on either side of the screen are a great way to highlight this opportunity, but you can also utilize the terrain and have a missed blow by the players damage something that threatens the enemy, or vis-a-vis. It looks like Lila decided to join us for this portion of the video. Making decisions can be one part of Dungeons & Dragons that drags down our combats, because we tend to try so hard to make the right decision that we don't focus enough on making a quick decision. You can try to impose speed restrictions on your players, and some tables will respond well to an egg timer that gets flipped over at the start of their turn, but others won't. Ultimately, it comes down to you as the DM to model the behavior that you're looking for, and to remember that faster decisions mean messier choices. Messier choices mean mistakes, and mistakes in combat are good. Not only do they make sense in the cacophony of battle, but they also make players feel good as they recognize the mistakes and can capitalize on them against their enemies. Speaking of quick decisions, Lila decided to leave. Most DMs will improve better at their tactical choices by focusing on making fast decisions than they ever will by focusing on making good decisions. And your pacing will thank you either way. Finally, in our effort to make great encounters, we can add objectives other than killing the other team. Because frankly, wait until everybody runs out of hit points is a really boring end condition. What are your favorite victory conditions? A few of mine include protecting an NPC, looting the room mid-battle because you know you're going to be run off, reaching a specific MacGuffin that's that's going to change the battlefield or end the fight. Stopping enemies from escaping as they're all trying to scatter and run, or warn somebody else. Keeping a battle quiet so that you don't alert the people in the next room. Disrupting the dark evil ritual, or convincing an opponent to switch sides, either with bribes or convincing an opponent to switch sides a la the redemption quest. Speaking of redemption, she's back. Another way to make battles more exciting is to embed them into the lore and story of your world by making them the culmination of quests. If you haven't already checked out my video on turning monster hunting into awesome quests, then you should do that. But if not, this other video, YouTube assures me you'll benefit from watching. Either way, thank you for watching, and happy adventuring.